In short, I think yes, the answer is clearly absolutely, but I think it comes from the foundation that says you can train people on psychological safety. You can give them information, knowledge, they can read, they can watch videos. I mean, the Amy Edmondson stuff is brilliant. And one of the things she talks about is psychological safety it's not a free hit. It's not something that means we accept underperformance. Quite the opposite. What we're saying is, in a psychologically safe space, we can externalize the issues and factors that are limiting our performance. We can openly discuss failure and error rates and all of those things. And of course, there's those loads of helpful articles and examples of where it's really, really played out. But I think, how do you know you've got psychological safety? I think there are three questions that would help from a team member standpoint. If you're looking at your team members, when did they last ask for help? And I mean, not just can you do this for me, not can you talk to so and so for me? That's practical help. This is,
Yeah.
I'm struggling, I need your help and support. When did they last ask for that? When
Yeah.
did your team members last admit they were struggling or had made a mistake of some kind? When did that last happen? And when did they ask for specific development coaching on an area they were finding tough? So not only had they identified it
Yeah.
themselves, but they said, can you help me do this? I'd like you to sit with me, observe me, spend some time with me to develop this particular area that is of concern. And the reality is, if Fred did this last Friday, and that's the only example you can recount, it's not psychologically safe. Now, Fred might
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
felt safe in that moment to do that. But what were
Yeah.
the circumstances around that? Was he under pressure? Was he in a corner? This is about proactive seeking of support, help, and admitting where I'm either struggling or have made some mistakes. And I think there's
Yeah.
also the flip side of this, which is also about confidence from a manager's standpoint. How do they behave? Do they show vulnerability in front of their team? And when you and I were growing up, this was not the done thing. You had to exude
Yeah.
confidence. You had to
Yeah.
exude this control. I'm in control. I've got the answers. I know it all. And of course, for me, that was the scariest thing ever. The fact that I had to not just know my job, I had to know my team members' job as well. And you go, but how can I know it better than them? And and actually,
Yeah.
coaching was a real it arrived at exactly the right moment in my career, because it meant that I could start to ask questions and use their knowledge to boost my knowledge and be able to reflect that back and develop them. But managers today need to be able to show their team that they make mistakes too, and more importantly, they own up to them. And that the other element of managers, particularly team managers, more junior, but maybe not, maybe senior too, that there's an ego about being part of that leadership group, whether it's smaller
Yeah.
leadership responsibilities, or you've got big leadership responsibilities. And by that, I mean organizational affecting roles, not just team
Yeah.
affecting roles.
Yeah.
Um, and do they show that vulnerability? Because you kind of don't want to show that you're the weaker of what does nature say happens to the weakest? They kind of get eaten, don't
Yeah.
they? Or they get attacked in some way. So actually, you've got psychological safety when these things are happening. Managers are vulnerable. They're showing it openly. They're admitting mistakes when they make them, and also showing how they went about fixing it or learning from it. That's a really good, powerful message.
Yeah.
And they're not looking to outdo each other. And of course, this is not easy. None of this is easy. And
No.
that's why it's a
No.
series of tests, checks and balances, if you like, that help teams to kind of deal with some of the things that are not the normal. These are, how do we get under the surface and work out what's going on with our people? How do we set our teams up for
Yeah,
winning, for succeeding, for delivering what's expected of them?
yeah, and I think you're right that again in our careers, I think you're right. There's been a move from managers to be the I can't show any weakness, I can't show any vulnerability, and all that kind of stuff. And I think there is increasingly a move to be more open. And again, some of the teams we've worked with, you see that openness paying dividends. You see managers creating psychological safety without probably even knowing that's what they're doing, because they are willing to open up if something's gone wrong, or share a story from their past where they've learned from something, and then the team's going, okay, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. And I guess back to kind of where we started this, we can train people in here's what psychological safety is. We can run, exercises and things and go, here's how you create psychological safety. But it's one of those things that actually it's definitely got to be led by the manager, hasn't it? Or we say actually organisationally, what's the culture organisationally that supports that allows me as a manager to be vulnerable, and therefore allows my team to feel that's okay, rather than it being perceived as a
And I
weakness.
think, that's really interesting, because as a manager, as a team manager, um, particularly in a big organization, you are a very small cog in this big system.
Yeah,
Important, because if you don't do your bit, there are some knock-on impacts. But the reality is, you might believe that you can't influence the big picture, when actually we would always go, well, okay, let's control the controllables then. Let's work on what's within your gift. You can absolutely create an environment where your team members can feel vulnerable, feel safe, can fail, and not repeatedly, but can learn from that failure, can grow and develop and become better tomorrow than they are today. That's all within your gift.
yeah,
And you can set an environment that makes that happen. What you can also do is you can demonstrate that that makes such an impact on your team performance that your manager, your line manager, might want to know a bit more about how you do it too. And all of a
yeah,
sudden, every change starts from somewhere. So be the change you want to see. Don't wait for the organization to change, because it won't. If you're waiting, control what's in your gift, make your environment. And guess what? One of the key parts of underperformance is the environment you create, the culture of your team.
yeah,
So create a culture that you want your team to feel that they want to be a part of, so we don't lose great people like we did when you moved on, in that example you shared earlier. you know how do we keep the people and make it feel like this is the right place for them? Yes, they might outgrow you, and that might be a development piece. And
yeah, yeah,
when you also peel all of this back, one of the stats, and you see conflicting information, but one of the stats that is common is that people leave managers, not jobs. And if
yeah,
that's true, and there's a caveat around the if, but if that's true, then surely the investment is helping anybody who manages people to get these tests, these checks and balances, however they choose to do them, to effectively go, have we got our ducks in a row? Are we set up to win, or are we set up to lose and fail?